Lost in the storm. Neria stumbled through the jagged wasteland, her body trembling with exhaustion. The wind howled around her, whipping up sand and ash, blinding her as she pressed forward. Her boots sank into the loose ground with each step, her muscles burning from the effort. She had lost track of how long she had been wandering. Hours? Days? Time blurred into an endless stretch of suffering. Her people had abandoned her here. She didn't know why. One moment, she had been standing on the deck of a ship, confused but obedient, following the orders of her superiors. The next, she was shoved into an escape pod, launched toward this forsaken world with no explanation. No way to return. She gritted her teeth, pushing forward. She would not die here. A dangerous encounter. A distant noise snapped her out of her thoughts. Voices. Neria dropped to the ground, heart pounding. She crawled to the edge of a crumbling rock formation and peered down. A group of men stood near a wrecked transport, their laughter carrying through the cold air. Their armor was battered, their weapons slung lazily over their shoulders. Raiders. Neria knew their type. She had seen what happened to those who crossed their path. Backing away slowly, she turned to leave. Crack. A rock shifted beneath her foot. The laughter stopped. A voice barked an order. Up there. Someone's watching us. Neria bolted. She sprinted across the uneven terrain, ignoring the sharp sting of stones cutting into her skin. Behind her, she heard the heavy footsteps of her pursuers. Shots rang out. A burst of plasma struck the ground near her feet, sending up a spray of dust and fire. She stumbled but forced herself to keep running. Then, she reached a dead end. A towering cliff blocked her path, jagged and impossible to climb. She spun around, heart hammering. The raiders were closing in. Their leader, a scarred man with a wicked grin, stepped forward. Well, well. What do we have here? He sneered. Lost little thing, aren't you? Neria raised her fists, even though she knew it was useless. The leader chuckled. Oh, she's got some fight in her. I like that. He reached for her. And then the world erupted in chaos. A stranger's intervention. A blur of motion. One moment, the raiders were laughing. The next, something struck them with deadly precision. A flash of steel. A figure moving too fast to track. The leader let out a strangled gasp, collapsing to the ground. His men barely had time to react before they too fell, their weapons clattering uselessly against the dirt. Silence followed. Neria stood frozen, breathless. Then, the stranger turned toward her. He was tall, clad in a worn cloak that barely concealed the weapons strapped to his belt. His face was shadowed by a hood, but she could see sharp features beneath it, watchful eyes that flicked over her, assessing, calculating. He held out a hand. You're lucky I was nearby, he said, voice low and steady. Neria hesitated. She didn't trust easily, especially not men with hidden faces and fast blades. But she had no choice. She placed her hand in his. The moment their fingers touched, something inside her shifted. Something was about to change. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. A fragile trust. Neria's fingers twitched in the stranger's grasp. His hand was rough, calloused, like someone who had spent years wielding a weapon. She hesitated for a moment before pulling her hand back. Who are you? She asked, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. The man studied her for a second before answering. Oren. He offered no other details. Neria narrowed her eyes. She had learned not to trust easily, especially after being abandoned by her own people. You saved me, she said cautiously. Why? Oren shrugged. You were about to die. Thought I'd do something about it. His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. He was watching her, assessing her every move. Neria had seen men like him before, survivors, dangerous in ways most wouldn't notice at first. She knew better than to let her guard down. Still, she had no other options. A freezing wind howled through the desolate canyon. Her body trembled involuntarily. Oren noticed. "You won't last the night out here," he said, turning away. "Come with me." She hesitated. He didn't wait for a response. He simply started walking, expecting her to follow. After a moment of internal debate, she exhaled sharply and trudged after him. She would keep her distance. But for now, she would follow. The hidden refuge. They walked in silence for hours, moving deeper into the rocky terrain. Neria's legs ached, but she refused to show weakness. She had no idea where Oren was leading her, whether he was taking her to safety or straight into another trap. Eventually, the terrain changed. The jagged rock formations gave way to an area where nature had reclaimed some of the land. Twisted trees and thick vines lined the edges of a concealed path. Oren stopped in front of a massive rock face and pressed his hand against a section of stone. A low rumbling echoed as a hidden door slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel. Neria tensed. "Come on," Oren said, stepping inside. Neria hesitated only a moment before following him into the darkness. Inside, dim blue lights flickered to life, revealing a well-hidden refuge carved into the rock. Shelves lined with supplies, weapons, and medical kits covered the walls. A worn cot sat in the corner, next to a small table scattered with maps and data tablets. Neria took a cautious step forward. "You live here?" she asked. Oren nodded. "For now." She crossed her arms. "And you're just bringing a stranger in?" He smirked. "You're not much of a threat in your current state." Neria bristled but said nothing. He wasn't wrong. She moved toward the cot and sat down, her body screaming for rest. Oren tossed her a ration pack. "Eat." She caught it, eyeing him suspiciously before tearing it open. The food was bland, but she devoured it. As she ate, Oren leaned against the table, arms crossed. "You're not from here," he said. "What's your story?" Neria swallowed. That was the question she had been asking herself since she woke up in the escape pod. "I don't know," she admitted. "I was abandoned here." Oren raised an eyebrow. "By who?" "My own people." For the first time, something flickered across his face, an emotion she couldn't quite place. "Why?" he asked. Neria shook her head. "I wish I knew." A reluctant alliance. The next morning, Neria woke to the sound of movement. She opened her eyes to find Oren adjusting his weapons, preparing to leave. "Where are you going?" she asked, sitting up. "Scouting," he said simply. "This place isn't as empty as it looks. If those raiders had a camp nearby, we need to know." Neria frowned. She knew she should stay put. Rest. Recover. But something inside her refused. "I'm coming with you," she said. Oren raised an eyebrow. "You can barely stand." Neria forced herself up, ignoring the soreness in her body. "I'll manage." He studied her for a moment before nodding. "Fine. But if you slow me down, I'm leaving you behind." Neria smirked. "We'll see who slows who down." A ghost of a smile flickered across Oren's face. For the first time since her exile, Neria felt like she wasn't completely alone. But trust was fragile. And she had no idea if Oren was truly a friend, or just another danger waiting to strike. Shadows of the past. Neria adjusted the stolen jacket Oren had given her, its rough fabric unfamiliar against her skin. The morning air was sharp, cutting through the canyon like a blade. The landscape stretched before them in jagged ridges and deep, winding ravines, silent, deadly, and unfamiliar. She glanced at Oren, who moved with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of this land. He had given her no instructions, no explanations. He simply expected her to keep up. She intended to do more than that. A dangerous discovery. The two moved through the terrain, keeping low when necessary, moving in silence. It wasn't long before they reached a ridge overlooking a flat expanse of ground. Neria's breath caught in her throat. Below them lay a cluster of structures, tents, supply crates, hastily constructed barricades. A raider camp. Oren crouched beside her, his expression unreadable. Looks like they've been here for a while. Neria studied the figures below. There were at least 20 of them, heavily armed, their movements organized. Not just common thieves. She exhaled sharply. I recognize that insignia. Oren turned to her. You do? She nodded, swallowing back the sudden rush of nausea. They're part of the faction that abandoned me here. Oren's expression darkened. So, they're not just raiders. Neria shook her head. They're worse. She hadn't expected to see them again, not so soon. Not like this. She forced herself to steady her breathing. This changed everything. Oren studied her carefully. Do they know you're alive? Neria exhaled slowly. I don't know. Oren considered that. Then we can't let them find out. She met his gaze. What's your plan? A small smirk touched his lips. First, we learn what they're doing here. Then, we decide what to do about it. Neria hesitated. She had spent so long running, hiding, trying to survive. But this was different. She had a chance to act. And she wasn't sure she could walk away from it. The mission begins. They moved carefully, creeping closer under the cover of rocky outcroppings. From the shadows, Neria could hear fragments of conversation. Still no word from the main fleet. We weren't supposed to stay this long. Find her before someone else does. Neria stiffened. They were looking for someone. Oren noticed her reaction. He leaned in close. What is it? They're searching for someone, she whispered. It could be me. Oren frowned. Or someone like you. She hadn't considered that. Who else had they abandoned here? Oren motioned for her to follow, leading her toward a stack of supply crates. He slipped behind them, pressing his ear against a nearby tent. Neria crouched beside him, heart pounding. A voice inside was speaking in a low, irritated tone. We can't leave without finding her. You know what she's carrying. Another voice responded. And if she's dead? A pause. Then we pray no one else finds her first. Neria's blood turned to ice. Oren gave her a questioning glance, but she barely noticed. They weren't just looking for her. They were looking for something she had. And she had no idea what it was. A narrow escape. A sudden shout from across the camp sent them both ducking lower. Patrol's coming, Oren murmured. Neria's heart pounded. They needed to get out. Oren motioned for her to follow, leading her in a wide arc back toward the ridge. But as they moved, Neria's foot caught on a loose stone. It skittered down the slope, bouncing loudly against the rocks. She froze. A nearby guard turned sharply, eyes narrowing. Hey! Oren cursed. Move, he hissed, grabbing her wrist and pulling her into a sprint. Shouts rang out behind them. Neria barely had time to think. She ran, pushing her exhausted muscles harder than she thought possible. The canyon twisted and turned around them, and Oren led the way as if he had memorized every path. Blaster fire cracked through the air. A shot barely missed them, striking the rock just inches from Neria's side. She gasped but didn't stop. Oren suddenly veered right, dragging her behind a rock formation just as another shot whizzed past. They dropped into the shadows, panting. Footsteps thundered past them. Seconds stretched into minutes. Then, finally, the voices faded. Oren exhaled slowly. That was close. Neria's hands were trembling. But deep inside, something else burned. She wasn't just running anymore. She had a reason to fight. And she intended to find out exactly what she was up against. The weight of the past. Neria's hands clenched into fists as she sat beside the small campfire. The flames flickered against the rocky walls of the cavern where she and Oren had taken shelter. The sound of distant winds howling through the canyon filled the silence between them. Oren sat across from her, sharpening a blade with slow, methodical movements. His expression was unreadable, but Neria knew he had questions. She had questions too. The voices from the raider camp echoed in her mind. You know what she's carrying. Then we pray no one else finds her first. She had no memory of taking anything important. No hidden treasures, no stolen technology. But they were hunting her for a reason. Oren finally broke the silence. You remember anything about what they might be after? Neria exhaled slowly. No. But I do know one thing. Oren raised a brow. What's that? She met his gaze. I'm done running. Unearthing the truth. Oren studied her for a moment before nodding. Then we go back. Neria had expected an argument. A warning. But instead, he was already planning their next move. She wasn't sure how to feel about that. Going back is risky, she said. Oren smirked. Everything worth doing is. They left at dawn. Navigating through the canyon under the rising sun, they moved with careful precision. The raider camp was still there, but the tension in the air had shifted. Something had changed. Guards moved in pairs now, their eyes scanning the horizon. They're expecting trouble, Oren murmured. Neria took a deep breath. Good. Let's give it to them. They crept toward the nearest tent, slipping inside unnoticed. The space was filled with crates of stolen supplies, scattered maps, and half-eaten rations. But it was the object in the center of the room that made Neria freeze. A small, metallic device sat atop the table, glowing faintly. Neria's pulse quickened. She had seen that before. Fragments of memory. A sharp pain shot through her skull. Flashes of scattered images. A sterile room. Voices speaking in hurried tones. A device being placed in her hands. Keep it safe. Her breath came in short gasps. The memory wasn't complete, but it was enough. Oren's voice grounded her. Neria? She swallowed hard. I know what they're after. Oren looked at the device. What is it? She hesitated. I don't know exactly. But I know it's dangerous. They didn't have time for more questions. A shadow appeared outside the tent. Someone's coming, Oren whispered. Neria grabbed the device. Then let's move. The escape. They slipped out the back of the tent just as a raider entered from the front. A shout rang out. They're here. Neria and Oren broke into a sprint. Blaster fire erupted behind them, striking the dirt and rocks as they ran. Neria clutched the device tightly, her heart pounding. Oren led her toward the ridge. We need to lose them in the canyons. The terrain was rough, uneven. One wrong step could send them tumbling down the cliffs. A shot barely missed Neria's shoulder. She gritted her teeth and pushed forward. Ahead, Oren suddenly skidded to a stop. Neria nearly crashed into him. What are you? Then she saw it. A sheer drop stretched before them, the canyon floor far below. They were trapped. Oren turned to her. "Do you trust me?" She hesitated only for a second. "Yes." "Then jump." Her breath caught. "Are you insane?" Oren grabbed her hand. No time to argue. Then he pulled her over the edge. Neria's scream was lost in the wind. As they plummeted, she saw it, hidden in the rocky cliffside below, an opening leading into a network of tunnels. Oren had planned this. They crashed onto a sloping rock, sliding into the darkness below. The last thing Neria saw before everything went black was the faint glow of the device still clutched in her hands. The price of truth. Neria's world flickered between darkness and awareness. Her body ached from the rough landing, and the taste of dust filled her mouth. A faint glow pulsed in her hands, the strange device she had stolen, the reason she had been hunted. A groan beside her. "Oren." She turned her head, wincing as pain shot through her limbs. He was sprawled on the cavern floor, breathing but unconscious. They had survived. For now. Above them, distant voices echoed. The raiders were searching. Neria forced herself upright, pressing a hand to her pounding skull. The cavern was deep, but not endless. If the raiders found the entrance, they were trapped. She had to move. Had to figure out what this device really was before it was too late. She shook Oren gently. "Come on, wake up." He stirred with a pained grunt, eyes fluttering open. "Did we die?" "Not yet," she muttered. Oren sat up slowly, taking in their surroundings. "Well. That was reckless. You told me to jump." "Yeah. Remind me to rethink my life choices." Secrets revealed. The glow from the device pulsed brighter. Neria frowned, running her fingers along its smooth surface. It felt warm, almost alive. She had seen this before. Not just in scattered memories. But in visions. Dreams. Somewhere deep in her past, this device had been part of her. A whisper filled the air, not from the cave, but from inside her own mind. "Neria." She stiffened. The voice was familiar, yet distant. "You are the key." Her breath hitched. The images flooded back. A hidden facility. Scientists. An experiment. Not a weapon. A message. This device held something ancient, something meant to be delivered across the stars. And she was the one meant to carry it. She staggered back, her heart racing. "I know what it is." Oren eyed her warily. "Care to share with the class?" She met his gaze. "This isn't just something they want." She exhaled shakily. "It's something they're afraid of." The final stand. A distant explosion shook the cavern. The raiders were getting closer. Oren rose to his feet, hand on his weapon. "We need a plan." Neria gripped the device. "We can't let them have this." Oren studied her. "Then we run?" She shook her head. "No. We end this." His lips quirked into a smirk. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." They moved fast, navigating the narrow tunnels until they emerged onto a higher ridge overlooking the raider camp. The raiders were regrouping below, scanning the cliffs for any sign of them. Neria's fingers tightened around the device. "You are the key." A surge of energy pulsed through her veins. Without thinking, she raised the device high. The glow intensified, spreading across the ridge in waves of shimmering light. The raiders froze. Then the scream started. Neria watched in shock as the energy seeped into their weapons, their armor, their ships, overloading circuits, frying power sources. Panic erupted in their ranks. Then silence. Oren let out a low whistle. Remind me never to make you mad. Neria stared at the device in her hands, her breath unsteady. She wasn't just carrying a message. She was the message. A new path. The raiders fled, their forces broken. The battle was over, but the weight of truth settled heavily on Neria's shoulders. She had power, power she barely understood. Oren placed a hand on her shoulder. So. What now? She looked toward the horizon. For the first time, she wasn't running from the past. She was running toward the future. And whatever lay ahead, she was ready. The end.